Hi, my name is Mia Day. I am with Dragonfly. I am working as the storyteller and communication specialist.
I'm Matthew Gould with the Hospitality Hub. I'm the Special Projects Manager.
And I am Kelcey Johnson, Executive Director of the Hospitality Hub
Excellent.
and Chief Bottle Washer.
Famous Slack title. Yeah, so today we're interviewing my boss, which I'm very excited about. Get to learn more about you. So let's just start from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I call St. Louis my hometown. Most of my growing up and learning how to be what I am happened there. My grandfather farmed north of Memphis in a town called Mumford. He had a 500-acre farm, so we would spend summers there. And then my father had a job that brought him back and forth between Memphis and St. Louis. So I'd live in Memphis for a year, go to St. Louis for 3 years, come to Memphis for 4 years, go to St. Louis for 2 years. And then I finally came here, I think in 10th grade, and went to school in Mumford because my grandfather was dying. He had brain cancer. So my mother moved here to take care of him. And so after I graduated high school, I went back to Missouri to go to college.
Wow.
What was life like with all that transition? I mean, you said it kind of shaped who you are. How did it shape you?
You know, my parents were very busy and kind of strict, but at the same time, they expected us to be self-sufficient. So I learned to start making money at a really young age, you know, raking leaves, shoveling snow. I was allergic, I had bad pollen allergies, so I couldn't cut grass. But me and my little brother had a really successful snow shoveling business.
That's awesome.
And had set customers that if it snows, I don't have to ask. I just come snow you, come shovel your snow, knock on the door, get your money, start your car, turn the heat on, and go on to the next house. And so that was a really good business. And then I also was I learned how to play poker when I was like 9.
Love poker.
And shoot dice when I was probably 8 or 9. And so I always had money. And so when I was about 12 years old, I think that's the last time my parents bought me clothes.
Wow.
I started paying for all my own clothes. Yeah, 12 years old. And so
That's crazy.
yeah.
Talk about independence.
And so my father had been a pool hustler. And so he was working for the TVA. A story he tells is that he was working for TVA and he was making $315 a week on his job. This is in the 60s, so
Wow.
he was happy with that, you know. And my mom was pregnant with me and living in Knoxville with his parents. And my mother said he would send her $300 every week.
Wild.
And sometimes in the middle of the week, he'd send her another $300.
So
Jeez.
Right. And so,
Wow.
And so my younger brother and I learned how to shoot pool on footstools. We learned how to play pool very young.
Stop. That's
And
so cute.
Even in elementary school, going to the pool hall, shooting pool for money was a source of income for me. Mm-hmm. You know?
That's insane. What a crazy childhood story.
Right. Yeah, sometimes it would start getting, we'd ride our skateboards up there, ride our bikes up there. And, sometimes it would start getting dark. And we'd be scared to go home. So our parents have to come get us
Wow.
from the pool hall, So it was just a different kind of upbringing.
Very unique.
Yeah. What do you? I'm just imagining younger you playing poker at that age. Because I play poker with you now.
Right.
Small Kelcey.
Now I feel like I kind of got duped a little bit because I didn't know he was that
Yeah.
versed.
Right.
What do you think that taught you about, like, what do you think you learned from those types of engagements? Like hustling in pool, playing poker. I mean, that's stuff that you typically need to know yourself a pretty good amount to do.
Yeah, what I learned, and I see it so much, especially in my daughter. One of the nicknames we have for her is the grinder, because she has been making tons of money since she was a young person, and she just holds on to money. And that if it is to be, it's up to me. I know that's a cliche, it's been around for
No, it's a great saying.
Never heard.
And but we grew up, we didn't get an allowance. We didn't. You want money? It's out there. Go get it.
Yeah.
And when I was a sophomore in high school, I used my brother and my cousins to learn how to cut hair. I went and bought a set of clippers and learned how to cut hair. So 11th grade, 12th grade, all through college, while I was in the military, I was like
Barber.
the kitchen barber. You could come
That's
and get
incredible.
your hair cut for half the price of anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't like your haircut, you don't have to pay.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And
I know a lot of guys that did that in college to make some extra cash.
Right.
It's smart.
Right, right.
So when I'm just trying to picture it. So when you're doing these things, are you having the thought in your head of like, I'm just stacking this money up, or are you kind of going around betting more, spending more, just kind of?
Oh, I'm blowing it all. Because I know I'm going to get some more. I wasn't good with money.
You're blowing it all.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you mentioned that, from high school you transitioned into the military. When did that decision?
College first. And then-
College first. Okay. So what did that transition, that decision-making process look like?
You know, I went to college for 2 years. I majored in hotel and restaurant management. Like, even to this day, anybody who works at the Hub knows my hobby is cooking. And sometimes I'll cook for the entire staff. I
Right.
do omelet bar, quesadilla bars. I'm smoking some briskets for the staff next week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
So kind of was always around the restaurant business. And so I majored in hotel and restaurant management. And after my sophomore year, I stayed in St. Louis and just hung out bartending, that kind of thing. And to me, the money was incredible. I was making like $90 to $125 a day. You know,
Wow.
It was like I won the Powerball, you know?
Just eating it up.
And I was only spending like 75 or 80 of it a day, so I had gas.
Yeah.
You know, and so I decided to leave my school and go to a better hotel and restaurant management school that had more culinary classes. I took culinary classes at that school, but after I took the most difficult one, there were no more culinary classes for me to take. So I decided that I was going to go to one of the top hotel and restaurant management schools in the country. Number one at that time was Johnson & Wales. Number two was University of Houston. And so I applied to both, got accepted to Houston. And so I went, me and a buddy of mine from the department, we loaded all our stuff into our cars, and we drove to Houston.
Wow.
And I think I had $300.
Just that hustler mentality,
That's
man.
just blowing my mind.
Right. And so we went down there and we found an apartment the first day. They had this
Wow.
place called Apartment Finders, and it's free, and they found us an apartment, and his grandparents sent him money for the deposit, and we moved in, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
Worked out.
And a couple of days later, I got hired at the only job I've ever been fired from, bartending for the Hilton.
Okay.
And so I'd never worked. I thought it was gonna be a lobby bar, like, you know, Wild Turkey and Water. Can I get a, Jack and Coke?
Yeah.
It was a nightclub in the bottom of this place. And so I'd only done lobby bar. Working for
fast-paced.
my first bartending job was with Bell's Enterprises here in town. And that's where I learned to bartend at the Ridgeway Inn, corner of I-240 and Poplar Avenue. Yeah. Broke my heart when they tore it down. There's an Olive Garden there now.
Of course there is.
Yeah, literally.
Right. And so, and after that, I bartended some everywhere, and so got fired from that job, and the same day got hired by Red Lobster. And so I was in Houston bartending, and most places back then, they paid bartenders $2.13 an hour plus tips.
Right.
And unfortunately, they still pay that same rate.
Yep.
$2.13. And this is 1985.
Crazy.
86. That rate has not gone up.
No.
And so I was down there doing that, and registered for school, never paid, never bought books, just going to parties. We went to the beach in Galveston every Sunday, every single Sunday. All the young black kids went, especially black Greeks. I'm a black Greek. If you want to know about that, I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
And and so that's kind of what I did, and so I didn't go to college. I just spent about a year down there, just having a good time and bartending and that kind of thing. And while I was there, I drove my car 16 hours to go to a party outside of Kansas City, Missouri.
What?
Yes.
What was the motive? I need to know.
Because the organization Omega Sci-Fi was having a party, and they called me and said, "Man, we're having a ball. It's 3 days, less than 3 days. You got to drive up here, blah, 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 blah." So I jumped in the car and drove up there.
16 hours.
Yeah, to go to this party.
Man on a mission.
And at the party, a fight broke out, and I was thrown out of a window.
Excuse me?
The stories.
Yeah.
Wait.
I've still got scars on my back from that. And
Was it
Why
like,
did the fight? Wait.
were you,
Don't glaze past that. What do you
Yeah.
mean you were tossed out of a window?
were you on a level of or was it the first level, or were you?
it was what it was. But it had nothing to do with me. Just I was using alcohol and having a good time and
Yeah.
fatigue. And
Oh,
I've
for
been
sure.
taking NoDoz. I don't know if y'all know what that is. This was before energy drinks. There's a pill you could buy
Stop.
at the gas station. You know,
Super
if you
healthy.
want to work really fast, you crush it up and put it in your gum, and then you cannot sleep. You cannot go to sleep. on
Wow.
this stuff. Yeah, exactly. God knows what was in it.
Yeah, literally. Speed.
80s.
Speed was in
Right.
it. Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm under the influence of all these things, and so when I get back to Houston, I decide I need to slow down. And so I come back to Memphis, and I got a job as the dining room supervisor at the French Quarter Inn. And I think there's a museum there now
Okay.
at the corner of Cooper and Madison.
Yeah.
That big, what is that? I don't know. Ballet Memphis.
Yeah, Ballet Memphis.
It used to be a
Yeah.
hotel.
Okay. Okay.
And their claim to fame was it was a New Orleans style hotel.
Right. French Quarter.
And every room had a jacuzzi and a ceiling fan. And the ceiling fans was like a big deal.
Big deal.
That's funny to think about.
Right. And so I did that for a while, and they gave me a big raise, and so I was managing the Sunday brunch and the dining room and the bar, and taught me how to order liquor and all this kind of stuff. And so at this point, other than the executive chef and the assistant GM and the GM of the hotel, there's nobody at the hotel of a higher rank than me. And all three of them had horrible jobs. I'm like, I don't want any of those jobs. And so I want to go to college. I want to go back to college and change my major to something else.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to be in this business if this is what I've got
looks
in
like-
store for me.
Yeah.
And so my parents said, why would we pay for you to go to school? You got arrested like 4 times while you're up there, and your grades are horrible. The only thing you did was pledge a fraternity. That's the only positive thing that came out of it, because my father's a member of this fraternity, and several of my uncles and my little brother, and it's kind of like the fraternity. And if you're in my family, this is the fraternity you join.
Right.
And so I called my brother, who's in the Air Force, to borrow money from him, thinking he's in the military, he's got plenty of money, which is a myth, right? And so he said, man, just go talk to a recruiter, and he'll work it out that they'll pay for you to go to college. He didn't say I had to join. But I went down there
Stop.
and talked to a recruiter, and he sold me on the Air Force, and best move I ever made in my life. I'm so glad I went to the Air Force. And of course, they pay for your college and books and all
Yeah.
the things. And he asked me what kind of job I wanted, which was the stupidest thing I did. I told him I want a job that doesn't require me to go to tech school. Because a lot of times you go to basic training,
Yep.
and then if you have a high-tech job, like the job John is doing, people in the Air Force do this job.
Yeah.
But you may go to a school for 6 months. You know, I said, I want a job that I can just not have to go to school. I want to go to basic training and just go to my base and start working and get my stuff done so I can go to college.
Yeah.
You know? And so they gave me a job as a tractor trailer operator.
How was that?
in Washington State in the Cascade Mountains.
Oh, geez.
And so it's snow, it's ice, learn to use chains. And so I'm driving wreckers, forklifts, taxis, buses, again, tractor trailers. And so it was, and you're outside all the time.
Oh no, no.
So it was a tough job. you
Yeah.
know, to be out there like that. So
Absolutely.
but I love that I did it. You know, I was recently married, and half the people in my wedding party were guys I served in the Air Force with.
Wow.
You know, and so you make friends for a lifetime, and you know, I have all these veterans benefits that I get.
Yeah.
And so, and it taught me not to be a man. I think I became a man when I was like 13, but it taught me to be a disciplined man, that your word means something, that, you know, if you show up on time, you're kind of late. So anything you got going on, you need to show up early, you know. And in the military, being on time means at least 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
No matter where you go, you got to be 15 minutes early. And so those kind of lessons kind of helped me become who I am today. And between the hospitality industry and my lessons from the military, I use all of that in my management style at the hospitality hub.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm curious about, because it seems like it was a quick transition from original college experience in Houston, partying, having a good time, focusing on just, you know, pleasure seeking and, you know, hedonism. Then going to the military. What is flipping that switch like? Like, what are the first lessons you learn when you show up on base?
One of the lessons you learn is that all the stuff you went through in basic training, that stuff's never gonna happen again. There's nobody here to yell at you. You're expected to do your job. Nobody's gonna yell at you about doing your job. They're gonna put it on a board somewhere, and it's your job to go read the board and find out where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do, and sign, put your initials. You do so much initialing of things, which means you understand that this is where you're supposed to do, this is where you're supposed to be, and no one's going to say anything to you unless you don't do what you're supposed to do.
So it's really just like, get done what you got to get done and you're fine.
Right. For instance, I told you I was going to meet you here today. In the military, if you outrank me and you tell me, meet me here at this time on that day, and I just blow it off, you could actually send the security police to my room and have me arrested.
Arrested?
For disobeying a lawful order, yeah.
Wow.
Anything someone who outranks you tells you to do is considered a lawful order, and you have to do it.
Wow.
They tell you to go. You know, sometimes you walk into work, and they say, "You're not working today. Go over to the movie theater and give them some urine and some blood." Okay. And so you go over there,
Okay.
and they take your urine, they take a vial of blood, they give you a cup to, you know, evacuate in, and then they'll give you 2 shots. What was that?
What was that?
The lady will give you a piece of paper, she'll tell you what it was on the way out, you know? And so to this day, I won't take a flu vaccine because while I was in the military, it's mandatory every year you get the flu vaccine, and you don't get to say yes or no or when you do it. You walk into work, Kelcey, go to a movie theater. That's what they did everything at the movie theater at the base I was at. Yeah. So you go and you stand, there's all these guys over there.
That's, first of all, congratulations on getting married. But I think that, like what Matt was saying, it is such a big transition, and that's really interesting to unpack. And it sounds like you went from, you know, doing whatever you wanted to do to being told to do X, Y, and Z, and, you know, serious repercussions if it didn't happen. Do you carry that over into your life today, where it's you hold everybody else to that standard, you continue to hold yourself to that standard?
No, I don't. I definitely don't hold other people to that standard, you know, because it's unrealistic, you know, because basic training prepares you to understand that this is what is going to happen when you get where you're going. You stop being a citizen of the United States when you join the military. Do you know that?
Yeah.
You give up your freedom of speech. You can't get on the microphone and say whatever you want to say. You give up your freedom to assembly. You give up your freedom against search and seizure. If you're in the military, you can be searched anywhere, anytime, your car, your house, without a warrant. You know what I'm saying? You learn all that stuff because you're not a U.S. citizen. Your job is to protect U.S. citizens.
So is that similar to like when the GI Bill came out and they kind of talked about how soldiers are looked at as almost like mechanism by which the government deploys whatever they're trying to do? So you're more looked at as like a cog in a machine. You're no longer what that machine's protecting.
I wouldn't call us a cog because we're respected and given opportunities that you wouldn't be given otherwise. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My cousin joined the military, joined the Army at 19 and became a helicopter mechanic. And a few years later, he tested to become a helicopter pilot.
Cool.
You know, and now he's a helicopter pilot for an oil company in Abu Dhabi, and he makes more in a month than most of my employees make all year. You know, and he has no college degree. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that the military worked out for him. You know what I'm saying? And when you go to a military base, you see very young people doing very adult, mature jobs. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's just a different kind of place. And so definitely never felt like a cog. I felt like I'm part of something bigger than myself. Yeah. You know, and no one's gonna explain the whole everything that's in the lasagna. You're the cheese, shut up and lay there. You know what I mean? But we need you to shut up and lay there.
Yeah.
I love that analogy.
Toasty brown.
Did you take that well? Like, was that an easy transition for you?
It kind of was because everybody's doing it. You know, one of the things I didn't understand so much when I was serving is the idea of a uniform. It's not something that you wear. It's becomes something that you are. We operate uniformly, all having a same goal. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I'm a member of this squadron, and this squadron has this goal. And that squadron, they are photographers and they're gathering intelligence. And the thing I do supports the thing they do. Because they may need me to come and pick up something and transport it somewhere. You know, whatever it is. And so we're all, you know, operating uniformly. And, you know, I wish that I had respected it and understood it better when I was younger. Because I probably would have stayed in the military longer than I did.
Yeah.
And you stayed in, you said 4 years?
Just 4 years.
And then what was the transition out of look like? Was that really difficult to go back to, when you leave the military, do you go back to civilian life?
Yeah.
Okay, was that transition difficult?
No.
I knew you were going to say that. I could tell.
He said, "Get me back."
At the beginning of this interview, did you? I know how to do all kinds of shit. You know what I'm saying? And so
yeah,
you can edit that out.
John, cut it.
And so I went right. The first job I got was a bartending job.
Oh, you went right back to it.
Wow.
Right back to it.
Wow.
Right back.
You're
to
consistent.
It. Right back to
You
it.
didn't go straight to college?
No.
Huh.
I went straight back to bartending and was bartending and working at FedEx and waiting tables at South City Grill downtown, taking a couple of classes at University of Memphis. And it's this thing where I had breakfast with my sister. She was visiting here. She had a master's degree. I'm still 2 years into a degree. It took me 6 years to get 2 years into a degree because I'm retaking all the things I failed
right.
the first time, you know. And so, you know, I'm 28 years old, and I've got a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house with a swimming pool.
Wow.
You know, and I am eclipsing what she's making with a master's degree. Mm-hmm. And so there's no incentive for me to keep going to school. So if I keep going to school, will I take a pay cut? You know?
Yeah.
Because I made so much money in hospitality.
Yeah.
You know?
So you said that you were taking classes though at U of M.
Yeah.
And then you finished that out?
I dropped
okay.
out and focused on the restaurant business, and then I started flipping houses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you flip houses for?
I've flipped houses from 1997 until the mortgage crisis hit in 2008.
That'll do it.
Still, that's a 9-year stretch.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that by yourself, or you do that with people?
Mostly by myself. I did a couple of projects with other people. I did a project or two with my little brother, and yeah.
And it's ironic that you did that and then got into what you do today.
Yeah.
Well, I while I was flipping houses, I went into it not knowing anything about construction. I'd never done anything with construction. My uncles and some of them were home builders and that kind of thing, so I was exposed to it, but I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so, but I did understand money, and I did understand if I can buy this house for this much and spend this much fixing it up, then I can sell it for way more.
Yeah.
Or I can put a mortgage on it and rent it out. And so that's kind of, this guy at my church was telling me about all that. And so I got into that. And I said, if I learn how to do one or two of these trades, then I can save some money on renovating these houses. And so what I learned to do was flooring, ceramic tile, all type, any kind of tile you name, I know how to do. And then stone and travertine and that kind of thing. And then I learned how to do lock and lay, floating floors, hardwood, and how to make a shower pan, and some people lay tile and can't make a shower pan. So one general contractor I worked for, he had people who knew how to lay tile, but I would do the shower pans for them. I'd go in, I'd charge $700 just to do your shower pan for you.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I went to Arkansas and took classes to learn how to do acid stained concrete. And that was a boon for me doing acid stained concrete because, now I can make $15,000, $20,000 a month doing floors.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and then the mortgage crisis.
And then the mortgage crisis.
How was that? Talk me through that. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I told you to watch that movie recently, The Big Short.
Yeah.
Which is just all about that. But
Right.
that I never knew that you even had any ties to that or that you were involved
Very
in
much
that.
so. And so high-end construction went away, where you could go in and charge somebody $3,000 or $4,000 for something that's going to take you 14, 16 hours to do. That went away.
Okay.
And so the contractor who I was subbing through, he went out of business. And the flipping of houses, people couldn't get mortgages.
Yeah.
You had to have really, because there was a time when you could have horrible credit. And they had a thing called stated income. You could tell a mortgage company how much you make without any documents.
What?
And lie?
Yeah, they would lie.
That's crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah. And so, you can say, I want this house right here. Well, the mortgage is going to be on that house. You need to make 3 times what. Well, I make $9,000 a month.
When really you're making 2.
Whether they had a job or not.
That's
Right.
crazy.
And so with stated income, it should have never been a thing.
No.
It should have never been a thing. And so I got houses I can't sell, that kind of thing. And so so I decided, I think I'm gonna go back to school.
Okay.
And so I looked at all my transcripts and I talked to this person. It was the school called Ashford University. Now it's the University of Arizona. They bought that school.
Okay.
The counselor said, you know what? You've got a lot of psychology classes. He said, I said, well, that was always something I was interested in. So whenever I had a chance to take an elective, I would do that. I said, but I'm not going back into hotel and restaurant management. And he said, you really can't do that online anyway. He said, so you made it in psychology, you can probably be through in a year. So,
Wow.
yeah. And so I'm 40 years old at this point.
Okay.
Right? And so I went there, majored in psychology, and I had gotten into a little trouble legally, and I was forced to do community service. And so, because I was doing community service, I started working with juveniles who'd gotten in trouble for gang activity and stuff like that. So I was doing that kind of work, and got an opportunity to do chaplaincy at juvenile court. So I did that for 5 years.
Wow.
And so all of this is coinciding with all this money going away and my business going away, and I'm going to school and I'm majoring in psychology. And I found out that Memphis Theological Seminary had just started a graduate certification in addiction counseling. They were one of only 20 seminaries in the United States that offered it.
Wow.
And so, a good friend of mine, Jared Bingham, he knew people at the seminary, because I'm like, I'm not going to seminary.
Yeah, that's a step.
No way, you know. He said, go over there and see how they treat you. And I just walked in, and these people acted like they knew me. You know what I mean? And they took me all around, and the lady who was admissions counselor, she said, hey, one of the priests made chili dogs. You want a chili dog? You know what I mean?
And you're like, absolutely.
That's my religion, chili dogs. And so, I ended up going to seminary. I really enjoyed my time there. And so the addiction certification took a year, and I decided to stay and get my master's in religion. Well, I was going to get a master's in divinity, but I stayed to get my master's there. I had done the chaplaincy thing at juvenile court, and had been doing some teaching Sunday school classes and stuff like that. And I was an associate minister at a little non-denominational church. And so Jared and I had started working together because I was stopped doing chaplaincy and started working at this homeless agency, really volunteering at this homeless agency. And I was managing Honey Baked Ham here in town. And while I was volunteering there, the guy said, the guy who was running the place, he was the director of the place, he said, do you know how to preach? He said, I got to go to India and I need somebody to preach for me while I'm gone.
Wow.
I said, absolutely. You know? And so.
Absolutely.
And the thing in my mind was, I've heard you preach and you're horrible. I'm way better than you. Hope you didn't see this video. And so
Oh my God.
that Sunday I came and I preached. He said, "Can you preach next Sunday?" And yeah, how much does that pay? You know, and so he's paying me to come every Sunday. And so they were having a board meeting, and they invited me to come to the board meeting.
Wow.
And they said, "How much do you make managing Honey Baked Ham?" And I told them, and they said, "We can pay you a fraction of that." To come here and be doing this full time with us. You know, we do haircuts and sandwiches, and we do birth certificates, and we buy IDs and that kind of thing. And I said, okay, I'll take the pay cut. I'll make it up somewhere else because I'm a hustler.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got into pastoring and ministry. They ended up making me the pastor of the church and that kind of thing. And that's how I started working with homeless people.
Yeah.
And so this was in 1999, somewhere in there.
Wow.
Somewhere in there.
So 1999, you started doing that.
Yeah, because the mortgage price, so I guess I was there.
When the
And
mortgage
then
crisis hit.
it went to.
That's how I guess I was supplementing with the house.
That was my question. Well, one
Yeah.
thing that I find interesting, and I think a lot of people would, as a guy that like overthinks everything and like can't even imagine the abstract thing of like, I'll figure it out later.
Right.
How much do you think that plays into how you were able to maneuver so many different situations throughout your life? Because the fact that you hear that will pay you a fraction of what you're currently making.
Right.
And the first thought in your head is, cool, I'll make it up somewhere else. It blows
Right.
my mind.
Right. Well, for me, my mother, she has Alzheimer's now, but she was a minister and an evangelist and that kind of thing, and she kept us in church and that kind of thing. And she always had a lot of faith, and she thought that we should have faith, you know. And even when I was gambling, I'd pray to win, you know. You know what I mean?
I sure did.
Right.
I sure did.
So, so I just had a lot of belief that I've been saying this since I was in my 20s, and I'm 57 now, and I say to people all the time, "Oh, my best days are ahead of me, not behind me."
You just said that recently.
Things are only gonna get better.
Wow.
You know,
That's a great
the
mindset.
hardships that I've had, I'm not gonna repeat those. The potholes I've run into and bit my rim, I'm not gonna hit those because I know where they are. You know what I'm saying? And if you'll listen to me, I'll tell you where they are. And so I just believe that things were always gonna work out. And even if there's hardship and trials and tribulations and that kind of thing on Thursday, Saturday's on the way,
That's a beautiful perspective. but
Yeah, it really is.
And the thing we have when we have life and breath and sound mind is we have opportunity,
Yeah.
And there's so many things. I know Matt has heard me teach a lot, and my management style is very much teacher coach, and one of the things I ask of my employees and my students, interns, is that if you're stressed out, 9 o'clock at night, you turn off your phone. You don't turn it back on until 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll reduce so much stress from your life by doing that. The other thing is I work with a lot of social workers, and social workers, they give themselves away. They lay down everything for other people. And so one of the things I get them to do is, in your personal life, practice the 10 no's. And the 10 no's it's very simple, easy to learn. You're gonna learn it right now. The next 10 things somebody asks you to do, you say no, no matter who it is, no matter what they ask you. If your mother asks you for a ride to the airport, you say no.
That's hard.
If your child asks you for a Snicker bar, you say no. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If your husband asks you, do you know where my shoes are? No. Just practice saying no. Because so many times, you know where my shoes are? He put those shoes somewhere.
Yeah.
But what you'll do is get up from what you're doing
Yeah.
and start tearing the house up.
Absolutely.
And he's got the shoes on.
Correct. Married? That's correct.
And so practice 10 no's. Because guess what? If I ask Matt to do something, hey man, can you do this thing for me? And he says no, he's giving himself freedom and he's giving me freedom to move on. Because now I can ask John.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or I can
No,
ask
it makes
somebody
sense.
else.
Yeah.
It's gonna get done. He doesn't need to feel bad because he told me no. And so many of our clients, so many of our employees, they say yes to things with their mouth when their heart wants to say no.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you put yourself in a situation where you spread yourself so thin that you can't be on time, you can't be excellent, you can't even be good at the thing you're doing because you're saying yes to too many things.
The preacher's making sense. I feel like I'm at a sermon and you're directly talking to me.
I was gonna say,
It's very much making sense.
this just brought me back because I shit you not. When I first started, he told us about the 10 no's. I, to this day, have not been able to make it to 10.
Really?
I can't, I mean, not.
A lot of
Good
people
goal.
can't.
It's a good goal.
But I will say this, even recently, I got pulled into his office. We got a bunch of changes, which we'll talk about happening with staffing. And there was something that one of our coworkers, Bailey, had asked if I could take up. I looked at him and her. I go, absolutely not. I go, I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the ability. And I go, I just got to dedicate my time to the other things I'm doing.
Yeah.
They were like, awesome, cool. We'll talk to someone else. And I think I talked to you about doing it. But that ability is really an extension of the leadership you provide, in my opinion. Because like I think teacher coach is a great way to put it, but I also think that you very much want people exiting your shepherding in a better version of themselves when they enter, and you don't care about where that leads them because you know it's their own personal journey. Some people stay, like myself. I've been here a decent amount of time, but I've seen so many people, interns, turn coworkers, off on the next adventure.
Right.
And I think that's what makes you a great leader of what we do, because you know that your team's going to cycle, but the mission doesn't.
Right.
You know, the people you're around are going to change, but you preach the same lessons, you teach the same things because you've seen them work time and time again.
Exactly.
But that 10 no's thing, when I first heard that at 21, hadn't even started my master's, I'm sitting there thinking like, I got to do 50 different things to show people that I can do what I say I could do. It was very difficult in my personal life to say no to stuff, just because to me, and I think you hit the nail on the head as social workers, like we do want to solve everyone's issues, but at the same time, we feel obligated to, because that is what we do for a living. And so like when you do it all day, every day, it's almost secondhand nature. What do you need? Cool, I'll be there in a second.
Right.
You know.
And the other thing that I try to get the people who work with interns, students, employees, if the person you're working with fails, that's not your failure. You know?
Yeah.
If you're working with a domestic violence victim and you've gotten her free of all these things, and the guy's in jail, or he just got out of jail and he doesn't know where she is, and then she calls him and tells him, and he picks her up, and next thing you know, you see her with a broken jaw. That's not your failure. You did what you could do.
Yeah.
Do you still feel heartbroken? Yes. Me, I'm a big crybaby, so I'm gonna cry about it. You know? But with my people, I tell them, that's not your failure. You gave her the tools.
Yeah.
You know? And guess what? When she comes back to you trying to get away from him again, you jump in again with both feet. You jump in again with both feet.
I think there's so many things you've been through, you've done, you've experienced, and there's just so much wisdom and advice. And I hate to backtrack a little bit, but I do want to clarify the timeline. At least, I mean, I want to know for sure. When did you exactly get involved with the Hospitality Hub?
The Hospitality Hub?
Yeah.
March 3rd, 2011.
Oh,
So that was a
wow.
separate agency.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you got introduced to the work and the population at the earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
on
Yeah,
in the 90s.
but not the hub
But
until.
as a volunteer.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out too about the story you just said, the point you just made, is that when you tell people that that's not their failure, it actually means something, because you're also the type that if it were their failure, you're going to let them know that too.
I would tell them that.
You know what I mean? For
sure.
But that's along the same line of that no, like whenever you ask me to do something, and if someone says no, you can move on. Having that validation of understanding that I know that I have someone who will call me out if I'm doing something incorrect, or will tell me where my failures or pitfalls are.
For sure.
It means that much more when you tell me it's not. Because I know that you're not trying to make me feel good. I know
I'm
you're not
not.
BSing me. I know that you truly mean you did what you were supposed to do and it just didn't work out for that individual.
Right.
But I think that's huge as a leader, as well as you're not afraid to tell someone they're messing up.
The thing my mantra that I use more almost than anything else is your clients have the right to self-determination. You know?
Yeah.
There was a story a few years ago about a woman who was sleeping on a bench right there between the federal building and the mayor's office right there. And it was gonna be an ice storm. And someone from the hub went by and talked to her, and she's like, I'm staying here. I'm not going to any women's center. I want to be alone, that kind of thing. I don't want to be around a bunch of people, that kind of thing. And so Downtown Memphis Commission, Blue Suede Brigade, they went by. She wouldn't move. MPD went by, and she wouldn't move.
Jeez.
And she froze to death that night. You know, but and different people blame different people, and somebody said it was the hub. Why did the hub let this happen, and that kind of thing? But we couldn't assault her and put flexicuffs on her and force her to go to the women's center.
Right.
And Blue Suede couldn't do that, and MPD didn't do it either. You know, and because she has the right to self-determination, and maybe she would have lived, I don't know, but she didn't.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so with my employees, I had to let them know that it's not your fault when this kind of thing happens. And if you work at the hub, you know that it happens 5, 6 times every year. Either cold or heat.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Or another, I just lost my first youth 3 weeks ago to an overdose.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
You know, and we do all that we can. One of the names that sticks in my head and it'll never be out of my head is a woman named Luz Acevedo. She was an alcoholic, Latino woman, super sweet. You never saw her without a black eye. Almost every time you saw her, she had a black eye. She dated the same guy for years and years. And she'd come to the hub and he'd be out front and we wouldn't let him in. We'd call the police. I've snuck her out the back door and put her in my own car, lay down, and I'm gonna take you to Living for Christ. I'm gonna take you. Back then, 8th Street Mission took men and women. I'd take her to Arkansas to get away from this guy. Then next thing you know, she comes in on Monday to get some coffee with a black eye, because this is what he did, you know. And so she finally left him, and we got her housed. At those, they look kind of like new townhouses over off Lamar Crump. You know where the trucking company is that we clean up that area?
Yeah.
Right up the hill from there, she had a house right there. And she started seeing him again. And she was cooking dinner and he began to assault her, so she ran and he chased her out into Lamar Avenue. And those trucks coming across the bridge, one of them hit her and dragged her 200 yards. And so of course she died from that. And everybody knew that was one of my long time. I'm always fighting for her and doing everything I can for her. And they came in and told me that what had happened and that the man had got arrested, but then they let him go.
Man.
So he's walking around here still in Memphis, I guess. But every month for the next 7 months, her Social Security check would come. And I'd be in the old Plaza building, everybody sorted mail there, you know. So and I'd see that little blue envelope and I'd write on there deceased and scratch it out and send it back and the next month another one would come.
Jeez.
Yeah, but is that our failure? Nah.
No.
Do we feel like crap? Absolutely.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
Because she had escaped it, you know?
Yeah.
She had escaped him and she escaped homelessness.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest thing for people outside of social work to understand is, especially when I was doing outreach, people hear that all the time of like, I explain to them we can't force people to take services, and I always hear, like, what do you mean force? Like, how would someone not want to receive help? And I'm like, I don't think you understand that when you're outside for 15, 20, 30 years, you form an identification, a comfortability.
That's right.
And a certain level of, this is just the way it is, and now I'm going to conform to this so that way I'm more comfortable. And so when some guy comes along in a Jeep offering all these things for the 15th time in a row, you don't want that help because A, you've been promised it before and it hasn't followed through.
Right.
Or the times it has followed through, it's only been for X amount of time, then you're back outside.
Right.
So you have a hard time trusting people. And on top of that, you're identifying now with what your experience has been for so long.
Right.
But people can't get past that mold or understanding of they're outside, they should be inside, why would they not want help? And it's one of those hard things to combat with this population and, you know, people outside of the work, because it seems like such a simplistic answer of like taking someone from outside, putting them inside. You don't think about the mental health, the physical health care, the lack of knowledge, lack of comfortability inside these new settings for them. And it's a really nuanced approach to the way we do things, but I think that's I want to start with, what was your introduction to the hub, you know?
Well, the founding members of Dragonfly also are founding members of the hub. And so the first I heard of the hub, Jared Bingham called me and said, hey man, we're starting this thing, you gotta come work here. And I said, what's it pay? And he told me, and I said, don't call me with anything like that again. I would never work for that amount of money.
Yeah.
And so before the mortgage crisis. So anyway, years later, the executive director, Beatrice Kimmons, who really put them on the trajectory to what we are now, which is a counseling center and a resource center. Because before that, it was what I call coffee couches and Catholics. It wasn't a place that helped people get out of homelessness. It was more of a triage and hospitality type of place. And they hired her, and there was another guy who was the executive director at the time, and his name was David, and he started working with her and listening to her talk, and he said to her, how about I become the associate director and you be the executive director? And she said, yes. This was in 2009, but we have to close this place down for a couple of weeks because it can't be this if I'm running it. And so that's what she did. And she came up with intake forms, and the intake form we use today is just a modified evolution of the one she started off with in 2009.
That's incredible.
Yeah. The ID program that we do today is the ID program that Jared, Ellen, and I started in 2001. And it moved from one agency to another agency, and then it moved to the hub when Beatrice came there. And so in 2011, David was, her associate director, was assaulted and broke his orbital bones, and not just riding his bike, robbed, mugged. He decided he couldn't live in Memphis anymore. So she was looking for an associate director. Jared called me again. He said, man, it's a part-time job. You have to be here all the time. It pays this much for this much. And I came. I interviewed for the job. And I found out years later, she said, I interviewed you and I had 4 more people to interview. And she said, I called them and told them, I don't need to interview y'all, I found somebody.
Wow.
Right.
What a compliment.
Yeah. And so, so I was a part-time employee. There was another part-time employee. Beatrice was full-time, and there was a guy named Tomcat that was full-time. We had a $158,000 a year annual budget.
Whoa.
Our payroll now is $100,000 every 2 weeks. So
wow.
We've grown.
Come a long way.
Immensely. I didn't realize that you got involved with the hub. You've been involved with the hub that long.
Right.
That's incredible.
Right.
What do you think have been like the biggest takeaways that you can recall over the years of this is what this population needs, we're gonna get it done?
The biggest thing was a women's shelter. That was the thing. There was nothing Memphis needed more than a place for women to sleep.
Yeah.
While you're trying to get them housed. Because they used to sleep outside on the mall. That was the shelter. Salvation Army had 19 beds and the sisters had 17 or 18 beds, and there wasn't a lot of beds for women. And what we were able to do in 2018, 2019, of course, spearheaded and led by Dragonfly, was to stop doing paper intakes, do all of our intakes on iPads. And one of the members of Dragonfly, Kyle, built a program that collected that data and organized that data, and so that we could grab whatever stat we wanted whenever we wanted, And that's when we found out, or we knew it, but we were able to prove that 35% of the people in this city who are homeless are women.
So massive
and
number.
6% of the beds are set aside for women.
Jeez.
6.
Yeah.
And so that's how the next thing that needs to happen in this city is a world-class women's shelter.
Which is what we got now. But
we need more.
We do.
Yeah, we built it too small. We built it based on what we thought was happening, but one of the things that happened was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And post-pandemic, these shelters still have not gone back to 100% occupancy. And one program went from being co-ed to male only So that took away 36 beds. That took 36 beds out of the system.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and you know, I won't say their name, but I treat them as an enemy when I see them in public, which I probably should, but I did.
Hey, that's a big loss.
It's a huge loss.
36 beds is a huge loss.
For women, that's a huge loss.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm curious about as someone under your ruling, you know, as an executive director, a lot of places, and I share my experience at places I've been prior to the hub, you know, like typically your boss is like the guy you don't see, and if you are seeing him, it's typically a bad thing.
Right.
Especially the executive director, like you
Right.
think high up. You don't even have a door in your office.
I do not.
You're involved in every single morning meeting. You
Right.
end with a note, and even intern level people, the staff that run the facilities, clients, guests, all these individuals can all come up to you and talk to you.
For sure.
Is that something that you built intentionally
Yes.
when you started that position?
Yes. Yes.
Why?
Because, and I definitely push this to my managers and supervisors and other directors, is what we are is servants. We're not kings. I know that everywhere else that people who are poor, illiterate, undocumented, whatever the thing there is they're going through, they can go anywhere and be treated poorly. You know?
For sure.
Everywhere they go. And not seen, and the whole story is not heard. Yeah. Get to the, you know. And at the hub, you know, we know who Mr. Black is, and we know who Miss Acevedo is, and we know who Miss Weatherall is, and we know these people, and we address them as we would our banker or our principal at our school. You know, we treat them with respect. And I've got clients who I call by their first name, but there's not many. They've been my client a long time if I call them by their first name. If it's otherwise, I'm going to call them Mr. or Mrs. And because we're servants, we're not kings. And because without them, what are we needed for? If homelessness went away, you don't need a hub.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I won't call them our customers, but they are as important to what we do as a diner is to Applebee's or Perkins, you know?
Yeah.
And so we need to treat them as if we value them. And we need to give a damn about them getting out of homelessness, you know? And as Matthew said, everybody knows who's been around that in all the years I've been to the 14 years, next week, 2 weeks will be 14 years.
Wow.
No office, and this is the third or fourth building I've been in, none of my offices have ever had a door.
That's incredible. I think that's a great philosophy.
Yeah, walk in.
Yeah.
You know, walk in and tell me what you need.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm not the grand poobah. I'm not the big cheese. We're in this thing together serving these people.
Right.
And we should all have the same goal, that people who come here exit homelessness.
Right.
Exactly. Well, that's a great segue for me to talk about my first impressions of Kelcey. So, when I was first introduced to you in 2021, we were still at Plaza when I started, so we hadn't opened up the new building with the shelter yet. We were all still huddled in there. I remember it was called the Jungle at the time.
Right.
But
I didn't know
it was a lot. But I came from a different agency, and so the woman that was my supervisor at the time had known Kelcey, y'all grew up the same area, very familiar with each other, and the way she described him was just everything that you would make you terrified to meet someone. Like you got to be on your P's and Q's. You got to know the knowledge. You got to know what you're talking about. You know, only answer questions if asked. You know, speak and spoken to. You know,
Your place.
I was an outreach worker, so like, you know, I don't dress the best now, but even back then, like I would, you know, go out in like, you know, just jeans and a t-shirt. That day I wore khakis and a collared shirt because I was, you know, meeting.
Trying to impress.
And he walks up just the most casual, like I think he had on like some sweatpants, a ball cap, t-shirt. I literally see him sorting mail out with all the other employees, and then he comes out to me, just gives me a nice, hey, what's up, man? Nice to meet you. And like puts his hand out. I shake his hand, saying, excited to have you. You're going to be posted over there. Let me know if you need anything. And then he walks away. And I was just so captivated by the fact that someone in leadership, A, took the time to come out and talk to me.
Right.
Just because I'm not used to that. But also, B, it felt like you were welcoming someone into your home.
Right.
You wanted me to feel like
Exactly,
I'm
for
happy.
sure. Absolutely.
And I think that echoes into like everything you do and across all the partnerships we have now and how much we've expanded. But that's all an extension of kind of like that forethought of when people are coming to service this community, they need to be treated like as such. They need to be respected just like we respect our community members. And that was a huge lesson for me to learn. And it really helped me when I eventually started with the hub. Even though you don't have a door, I will say it's still intimidating when you first start because you're like, do I walk in? Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
is that really the case? Or am I going to walk in and he's like, what do you want? But no, every time.
It was really nice when, I mean, I'm much newer and haven't even been here a year, but it was like I had heard and like great stories and had built up, this persona. And then when I first walked in, within seconds, you reminded me, like you said, of home. And it was so nice to just like drop all of the the tenseness that you have when you're meeting someone like that. But I think that across every company and every organization, things happen that mean something and attitudes change when it starts from the top.
Yep.
And everyone else that I've met that works at the Hospitality Hub has a consistent mentality of I'm meeting you where you're at. And I've recently learned the language from Matt, I'm loving you where you're at.
Right.
Yep.
And it's just giving credit to like, I truly believe it starts at the top and it trickles down.
It has to.
I try, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that you don't do anymore that I want to bring back, so sorry coworkers who do this. The only time I would ever get intimidated whenever he came around was when you would do those pop-up quizzes.
Oh, yeah.
Holy
I've heard of
shit,
them.
dude,
I've heard of them.
I just did one recently. You just weren't there.
For a reason. You're right. But you would used to walk in, so just so everyone knows, we are very intentional about the entire company coming together. That's a very big thing with us. You even spoke to me recently about breaking bread together, how important that is.
Absolutely right.
And that was really cool to me because you get to see people across teams doing different things. Everyone kind of comes together in the morning meeting. Some mornings that would be accompanied by pull out a pen and paper. And as soon as he would say that, you knew that a test was coming. Now, when I first started, my coworker Justice at the time, he purposely freaked me out. He's like, dude, do not get one wrong. And I was like, what? So what's going to happen, dude? He's like, I'm just saying, dude, I'll grade your paper, just don't get one wrong. And I ended up screwing something up or whatever. And like, I'm literally terrified. I'm like, do not say a word.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me and he was like, why didn't you know that answer? And I was like, I think I got confused with something else. He was okay, that's fine. He's like, but when you're out in the field and when you're talking about the service we provide, don't tell people what you think, tell them what you know.
Never. No one cares what you think.
And that has stuck with me tremendously. And you echo it all the time in our morning meeting.
Right. That's right.
But I think that's one of the, if I could rank
Love
the
that.
lessons, that's my favorite lesson I probably learned from Kelcey is don't tell people what you think, tell them what you know. Because I'm very, as social workers, we're very much like, I want to solve this issue, I want to be involved with this, or I want to go help out this person. But amidst that eagerness and the attentiveness to wanting to help others, you can get lost in the reality of what you can actually do.
That's right.
So you think that you're doing more when you're really hurting that individual. And that was a hard lesson to learn because I wanted to be that guy.
Yeah.
But you showed me, hey, it's okay if you don't know.
That's right.
It's about the attitude of finding out.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Kelcey,
Oh, God.
about a person's experience, about why you need to do what he's saying. Like a person that's like come from across town, how their experiences, and you tell them something that you...
We had an employee last year, I'll say, and she had given one of our guests a referral to a place that was closed and gave the person a bus pass to get to that place that was closed. And I said, where'd you get this from? And she said, I got it off the internet. I said, why? You work at the Hub. Why are you going to the internet for information? I said, all the information is here. We hold all the information about homelessness, poverty, hunger in this city, in this building.
Yeah.
Do I know it all? Absolutely not. But there's somebody in here who you can ask.
Yep.
And if you ask the guest reception supervisor or the guest service supervisor and they don't know, they're going to call that agency and say, hey, are y'all still giving a $25 gift card if a person comes and gets an HIV test? Absolutely. Okay, so I'm about to give Mia $25. I'm about to give her a bus pass so she can come and get an HIV test. She's not positive, I'm sure, but we just got her into housing and she wants crab legs. And so,
Yeah.
and so not only do we get accurate information, we give a warm handoff.
Yep.
You know,
Every time.
And I mean, after I jumped down her throat about this, 3 days later, she gives a person a letter, a signed letter, to go and get clothes from Catholic Charities. I don't know where she found this letter.
Yeah,
but Catholic
they take
Charities stopped
letters?
doing that in
I'd
like
say, what?
2015.
Okay.
It used to be a thing.
Okay, I didn't even know.
If you want a clothes, you come to the hub, you get the letter, we sign it. And I don't know how that was in our building because we weren't in the same building anymore. I think she pulled it out of, I don't know where she got it from.
That's crazy.
And I said, why would you do all of that when all we have to do is call Calvary and she can go over there and get new jeans? I said, they got a big shipment of Lee jeans and khakis and stuff. I said, why would you send her to a place that doesn't do clothes anymore? Well, I got this letter. I said, from where? She said, it was on the computer. I don't know where she got it from.
Yeah.
And I just said to her, I said, you can't be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, because you're telling people, you're guessing. And when you guess, you give people the runaround.
False hope.
And you know, and I know John's heard me say this a bunch of times. I said, and the people who come here, they didn't go to James Davis or Macy's and buy those shoes and have them fitted for them. They got them out of some clothes closet. They're a size too big, they're a size too small, they're a size too wide, they're wet. They've had the same socks on for 2 or 3 days. They may or may not have underwear they've been wearing for a week. And so they're desperate to get something to wear. And you send them 4 miles away to a place that doesn't even do clothes.
You destroy that trust that that person has reached out to.
And I said, we cannot give people who are already traumatized additional trauma by giving them the runaround. And I said, they go down here to catch the Madison trolley, to get down on that, to get to Cleveland, and you go up the hill of Cleveland to get to Jefferson. And I said, you know, the Madison trolley's not running anymore, right? Oh, you know, I don't live downtown. I said, you can't be here.
Yeah.
But I will say too, like
You can't be here.
No.
with stuff like that, when that happens, right? Like, I think I've been around long enough to be able to speak to the fact that you are always fair in those situations, and usually when something like that occurs with someone, it's a multitude of occasions that have already occurred.
Right.
And the other thing too is it's kind of like with great whatever power comes great responsibility. When people, like when you have access to leadership like we do, you have access to information. If you're not utilizing that to the degree by which you should, there is no one else to blame. And I think that's what.
Right.
Whenever I've seen and whenever I've seen those things happen, it's been less about getting onto the individual, but it's more putting a spotlight on like, here are all the things that you could have done over these multiple times.
Right.
And I think that as social workers is really hard pill to swallow sometimes for people. But that's also why I love the way that you lead, is because it's not about putting someone in a box and then telling them to do a specific thing like it is a lot of places. It's, here's this opportunity, make of it what you will. Some people do amazing in their specific position. Other people grow out of it and continue to do other things.
Right, for sure.
But the opportunity is always available.
Exactly.
And leadership's always available. And I think for some people that can be difficult, because a lot of people enjoy, hey, I'm here for this reason, I do this specific thing, this number I call.
Right.
And we have those on staff now, just
Right.
people that do such amazing work at the very specific thing they're supposed to
Correct,
do.
that's very true.
But at the same time, when those people that come in and they expect that, but they're kind of putting that more nuance, like when you're working with people, you don't know what your day looks like.
Right.
Shit, on outreach, there were days where I would come in and I would spend the first 5 hours of my day talking to one person because I needed to build that trust. And then the next day I'm talking to an encampment of 65 people.
Right.
Yeah.
And that versatility was what attracted me to the work, but at the same time, the ability to know, if I don't know this answer, I can call this person or I can call
Right.
that person.
Right.
But you have to have that mobility and that thinking. And I think a lot of people can get lost in that.
Right.
Does it lead to like an innovation of problem solving? Is that kind of
Yes. Well, here's my biggest thing with the hub. I think we are what we are, and we're growing the way we grow, and we're becoming what we're becoming. Because the answer is never no. It's how else can we do it?
Yeah, how can we do it?
And so I think the
And
innovation.
if we don't do it, who does do that?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
does do that?
Because we do so
Well,
much
it's called
already.
the hub
Right.
for a reason.
Right.
You know, we're a resource of we have a million resources, and if we don't have it, we will connect you to another. You know, you come here, and it's the
Right.
central unit.
Right. We don't do gas cards. And so if you're stranded here and you need a gas card, we'll have a partner that does gas cards. All you got to do is go up there and have a valid driver's license, and they're going to give you a gas card,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I'll plug Hub University because it's a new initiative. But I think like that was like a lot of like the meeting I had the other day with like the whole company of, I never want someone coming in and the answer being no to workforce development
Right.
or income.
Right.
Because if we're not directly providing it through the new initiative, we have now created partners and we're creating these avenues to direct people to.
Correct.
And I think that's kind of like the North Star that the Hub always had is, if I don't know, I'm going to find out.
Right.
Just give me a few minutes, or
Right.
go sit over there and
Right.
enjoy a cup of coffee.
Right.
And I think that's really cool. And the other thing that I think the Hub does tremendously, that's infused into everything we do, is the trauma-informed care.
Exactly.
You know, I've given a few tours now, and we gave one recently to people that we previously did podcasts with, and Sean literally cried when he walked in, and he just saw the beauty of the space. And it's always funny to me whenever I tell people where I work and what we do, because the first thing they think of is some government office with damp lighting, gross ceiling tiles,
Right.
and you pull a number 65, you're up next.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What we do is we go up to the individual, we call them by their name.
Right.
You know, the GRS team does a tremendous job. You know, shout out to them, because that is, in my opinion, one of the hardest jobs to do, because you're
agree.
the first contact point.
Right.
You don't know what's coming in.
We always call it the fish grease.
Yeah.
Hottest place in the building.
So
fish grease.
when I
Five
first
fish
started,
grease.
side note, when I first started, I did that at the old Plaza building. He came up to me like 2 or 3 days later when I was on hours. She's like, "Hey man, like you did pretty good. Like you want to be in there?" I was like, "Absolutely not." in no way, shape, or form. I was like, "I appreciate the compliment. I'm gonna stick to hours."
That's my third no of the day.
Yeah, I learned at that point. But no, but I mean that GRS team does a tremendous job. They will write down a description of the individual.
That's right.
You know, like white t-shirt, blue jeans, you know, white shoes, you know, whatever it is. And then the case counselor walks out up to that individual. "Oh, hey, like how you doing today? Like I'm your case counselor. My name's, you know, Bailey. You're gonna come back with me." They walk back
Right.
with you. They learn about you. And I think, you know, some of the most impactful conversations I've had as a case manager come from just simply hearing someone's story.
Right.
And I think that part of the work gets overlooked because we do it so well.
Right.
But, and again, that also points me to like my favorite thing that I watch when interns come
Right.
is when they go from GRS to GS and
Right.
then they have a meeting with you.
Right.
And the way that you interact and that you talk about these different cases, it's like we don't talk them like it's like a docket at a courthouse.
Right.
Say, "Well, what's going on with Mr. Black?
Right.
You know, what happened with these
Right.
different people?" It's their lives, and we care.
It is. It is.
And that's
It is.
embedded in every single thing we do, and that's, you know, that's been a huge reason why I've been able to really look at the work we do and understand that we make meaningful change, not because of who we are or
Daily.
because we got this budget or this new bill. It's because we give a shit.
That's it.
Well, speaking
And if you don't, you have to leave.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you're nonchalant about a person's case, you've heard over and over, "I don't have a door in my office." And so you're able to come into my office anytime and talk about your case.
there's no excuse.
But when you walk into my office,
Better know.
you better know where that person slept last night. I might call you a motherfucker if you don't know.
Got it.
I'm being serious.
Yeah,
Why
no,
are you in my
100%.
office discussing the case and you don't know where they slept last night? If you don't
Oh,
know where
yeah.
they slept last night, you're not helping them.
Yeah.
It's so important to know where they slept last night.
Yeah.
If they slept in the shelter last night, where were they before they slept in the shelter? So we can figure out where we're going from here.
Yeah.
Every GS person I've come in contact with, that I've seen them do their work, that is the
They
second
will
question
not,
they ask.
They will not walk around not knowing where a person slept last night.
Name, where'd you sleep last night?
Where'd you sleep last night?
Every
Got
time.
goosebumps remembering that. Like,
Yeah.
he used to, in the afternoon meetings we used to have, if you brought something up, and he would be like, "Wait, so where were they?" And like you didn't know. He'd be like, "All right, like, are you sure you sure you're working with this guy?" And it's just a
Are you
shit
sure
show.
you were his case counselor?
Well,
yeah.
So let me ask you this, because that kind of brought up in my head. What's your favorite part Because you've been really involved in case management for so long, and you've seen so many different avenues. And even as an executive director, you still do case management with all the veterans that walk through that door.
I still do.
All the ladies upstairs, whenever they're running into trouble.
That's right.
You've had a few talks with youth over at Hub Hall.
Right.
Usually bad ones, but what's your favorite part about being an executive director and overseeing the actual staff and the programming, the people?
I think the teaching, training, coaching, 3 o'clock class is my baby. You know, I love to bring topics and us discuss them from a counseling standpoint, from an advocate standpoint. And it may not be something that happened in the building. It may be a movie that I saw.
Yep.
And I saw a spiritual gift in a person, or I saw bipolar disorder being manifested in a weird way in this movie. And so I'll tell everybody, watch this movie. I'm going to be asking y'all about it tomorrow. Watch this episode of this show, because this is one of the most magnificent displays I've ever seen on film of a person who has true bipolar, manic depressive disorder, from the euphoria of everything I touch turns to gold to I can't get out of my bed for 4 months. I want everybody to watch this episode, and we're going to discuss it. You know, and so I love that, and I see the different ways
Reactions.
that people view the world. You know, and one of the things I say to everybody who works at the Hub or studies at the Hub as a student or intern or whatever, nobody grew up in your mama's house but you.
Yep.
Facts.
So the way your worldview, your theological belief system, your ideas about morality are so different from the next person.
Right.
One of my favorite employees came to me the other day, and she just off the cuff said to me that violence never solves anything. And I said, oh no, some things are only solved with violence. Some things, if you don't add some violence to it, it's not gonna get solved. And she thought that was the craziest thing she'd ever heard in her life.
A lot of people would think that's a crazy response.
You know?
Yeah.
A person, if you can get to be 30 years old without balling up your fist and punching somebody, I don't know where the hell you grew up. How did you do that?
Yeah.
How did you do that? You must have ate a lot of shit sandwiches and everybody bullied you. I don't know how you got to be that old without ever defending yourself or your idea or your sibling or your household. Yeah. I don't know how you did it without violence.
Yeah.
You know? So, not being here a proponent of violence. I'm just saying that the world is made up of a lot of different people and situations.
It's very gray. No black and white.
There's way more gray than black and white.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah. So.
I mean, as a guy that's attended those classes too, one of the cool things he does is, you're good public speaking.
Right.
Yeah, you're very comfortable, and I suck at it. Face
he doesn't. He just turns red.
Turn red. I'm sure it was like that when the cameras turned on earlier. But one of the things I always value at those 3 o'clocks when I'm able to attend them is you never feel like you're being taught something. You always feel like you're almost like you're being walked through, like in your own evolution of whatever you're trying to speak on. It's never like, this is what this is the outcome of that. It's always, what do you think about that?
Incredibly interactive. It's always very interactive.
Which I think is a really cool way to do things, because again, when you think of leadership, you kind of think of the guy at the top of the heap, and he puts orders down and all this kind of shit, and it's never been the case with the Hub.
No.
And you've always been up into innovation, no matter where it came.
Right.
I've said some shit that's changed around there.
Well, yeah.
When I was on outreach, like the very first position.
One of the things that I talk to the Hub peeps about is I never, ever, ever need anybody to kiss my ass. I hate it, as a matter of fact. I'd rather you disagree and show me where I'm wrong in this thing. Maybe I'm not totally wrong, but what you're doing can be tweaked. You know what I'm saying? We've been doing this every day. We really could only do this on Tuesday and Thursday, and we'd actually see more people.
Yeah.
And and our whole intake system has changed because my counselors disagreed with me about something. Matt has disagreed about it. And everybody at my company knows if I ask them to do something, they can say no.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Can you pick up something? No, I can't. I don't want to pick up that shift. I'm tired and, I'm in this relationship and he feels neglected and I kind of need to go home and make spaghetti tonight. So, yeah. And guess what? When you tell me no, what does that do? It frees you up and it frees me up.
Yep.
Right all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Because I can get somebody else.
Yeah. But you also value your people.
And I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
There's no shift I won't work.
Yeah.
I worked the 3 to midnight, not this Christmas, but last Christmas. Because we had warming center and we needed people to work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to do something I want to do.
It's a good way to live. It's okay.
I think.
Wait, what? You want to?
Was that Lizzie?
Yeah.
Who is she?
Player State Director.
She works here.
Oh, she's loud.
She is.
I had a question. What does success look like in this line of work?
Success is, there's so many ways that we can succeed. Not just getting a person an apartment. Of course, that's success. But we had a guy who just dropped out of the sky. I don't know where he came from. And he would sit on the ground on 2nd Street, leaning up against the wall, not talking to anybody. And one of my workers went down and talked to him and he didn't want to talk. Went down the next day, he didn't want to talk. Went down the next day, took him a cup of coffee, he didn't want it. Went down the next day, took him a cup of coffee, he took it. On the 6th day, he walked up to the hub and fixed his own cup of coffee and used the bathroom. And we gave him 2 or 3 cigarettes. And he smoked the cigarettes and he came back in. He probably drank 5 or 6 cups of coffee that day. And that afternoon he came back, we stopped serving coffee. And the guy who did all this, it was my outreach director, his name was Tom Cat, famous outreach worker here in Memphis. And he talked to the guy, and the guy said, I was in the Navy. And so now he comes to grab me, because whenever there's a veteran, they're gonna come get me.
Right.
And I said, so what's the deal, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, I get a check. He said, but I don't have any ID. He said, I got mugged, beat up, didn't have any ID, got arrested because didn't have ID. The police let me out. They dropped me off here. I sat down on the ground. Right. And so it turns out this guy is 100% disabled with the military. At that time, he was getting, I guess, $3,200 a month. Hadn't had access to his bank card in 6 months.
Jeez.
Exactly. And so we were able to get him an ID. Where you bank? I bank at Regions Bank. Walked him right up to Regions Bank, and from there we put him in a hotel room for a few days, then a rooming house for a couple of weeks, got him into his own apartment. How many successes are there in that story?
15.
There's a bunch of them. That he accepted the cup of coffee was a success.
Yes.
Because on outreach, sometimes you take Chick-fil-A sandwiches and that kind of stuff, they'll pull a gun. They have pulled guns on us. Get away from me. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And so when you get them to say yes to your gift, that's a success.
Yes.
And then him walking up there and getting his own cup of coffee and then getting a second cup and kind of hanging around and smoking cigarettes and speaking to people. There's 4 or 5 successes.
Yeah.
And then him telling us his story. Telling us his truth. One of the things I say to her all the time, what is it? Nobody owes you the truth.
Yep.
You earn a person's truth.
Yeah.
Wow. I never heard that.
Well,
That's great.
It goes back to the idea of self-determination. Like
That's right.
there was a veteran that lived at Overton Park that I mentioned countless times, but we literally had to go talk to him for 4 to 6 months straight, just sit down and speak with the guy. And then eventually on that 50th time showing up,
Right.
he was like, well, actually, could you help me out with an ID? or is there a place where I could mail this stuff because I got to fill out this form, whatever.
Right.
But to go there and assume that because I know what I can provide, this person owes me A, a conversation, but B,
Right.
just giving a shit.
Right.
He'd been out there 15 years. Who am I to
Right.
go tell you how to live your life?
Yeah.
Right.
And so self-determination, it's all embedded within the idea of my job. It's like what I told a partner that we have recently come over. I said, our job is not to speak for people. It's to hand them the microphone.
Right.
And if I hand that to you and you tell me, leave you the hell alone, I'm going to show back up.
Yep.
I'm going to check on you. I'm going to show you that I care about you. But
Right.
if the extent of our relationship ends with you
Right.
telling me that you don't want any help, but you want someone to talk to,
Right.
that in and of itself is a huge success, because at the very least, he's aware of the fact that someone cares for him outside of the utility of being able to provide a service.
I was teaching a group the other day, and I was telling them that when I'm on outreach, if I'm in an encampment, even if a person's on Main Street and sitting on a bench, I'll ask, hey, can I approach you? Is it okay if I come a little closer
Yeah.
and talk to you? I don't assume because I got a hub button that you want to talk to me.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not a big shot.
No.
I'm not your king,
Yeah.
but I'm here to serve you if you want me to.
I think that's such a good point of like knowing the difference between, I think that's why so many people would get like frustrated in y'all's position of being like, I keep going and I keep trying and they just won't give in. It's like, you have to remember, like, you have to build that trust. In order to do that, you have to show them that no matter how they act, you are loving them where they are.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be like, you know, more of the discussion with this kind of stuff.
The other thing is, if I come and approach you and you say, you know, he can't wait for me to come see him.
Yep.
There's somebody who's dying for you to come back through again.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the other thing is, my feelings can't be hurt if you don't want to talk to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I may approach you and you run away, and I come again and you get away from me and scream. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna say, Alyssa, there's this girl with a purple sweater. Go see if you can talk to her. And then you will talk to her. Because somebody who looks like me, who's my size or whatever, may have traumatized you,
Right.
Yep.
harmed you seriously.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah. I learned
we
that.
have to take it from different angles and not take it personally, because we're not the kings, you know?
You have to be secure in yourself and your abilities to where things like that happen, you don't get defensive. Nothing productive is
Who are
going to
we
happen.
to be offended?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are we to be offended? I've had some very profane conversations with employees and ex-employees because they're offended by somebody not telling them the truth. That man told me he don't drink, and I got him over there, and now he over there drunk every day. Well, he didn't. You didn't earn his truth.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
you didn't earn his truth. And did you pay attention to him when he came in here? Maybe he didn't smell like alcohol, but he smelled like pee. Because he drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also it's like the idea of like a preconceived notion that I have an idea of what success is. Like that, I think that
Right.
to speak what our success is, it's like if I go into a conversation or if I see someone, then I have an idea already in my head of what success will be for. I'm already behind the ball. Because in reality, success, again, comes from having that open conversation and then telling you what success is. For some people, success quite literally is just being able to speak with someone else. Like you said, the people that I got closest with on outreach, I always like to talk about, like, I think my favorite comment I've ever gotten is, what the fuck is a suburb bitch gonna do for me?
All right.
Ended up being one of my favorite people. Just because I knew no matter what he told me, I knew I was getting the real thing.
Right.
I knew he wasn't gonna bullshit me because he had already told me everything under the sun to offend me. But also at the same time, when you continuously show up and then you don't press upon them what you believe to be successful, you really learn that they're a lot more nuanced. They're a lot more aware than what people think. You know, like people that are sleeping outside, they're aware of where they're at. They're aware that they are in the elements. They're aware of all these things. But people don't give enough of a shit about them to actually go have those conversations.
Right.
So they get lost in the shuffle. They get treated as invisible. So when someone comes along and sees them, it can be frightening. And I learned that lesson that you just spoke about. One of the first intakes I did at CMI, they found a woman in a dumpster after being sexually assaulted. And of course, I'm walking up like 2 weeks into a job, just, hey, how's it going? She's terrified, shaking, would not talk to me. But I had to complete that intake because the individual had called me. And so I went back up to the other caseworker at the time that was female, was outside of Rogers Place over at that church. During the winter time, they opened up their doors. She would talk to her. And so I did an entire 56-page intake asking the case manager the questions, who then would walk 10 feet away to ask her the question, come back.
Wow.
And we did that. And we were able to get her in, and she was able to get into shelter and get mental health treatment. But I learned that day, that really impacted me because, again, I know who I am as a person, but I also know that, like, 6'1" ginger white dude walking up to you is not always, like, the most appeasing thing. And so I had to realize that, like, no matter what the intention in my heart was and no matter what I knew going into it, didn't matter because it's all about the perception of the individual and trying to help. And so if their perception or their experiences have taught them to be wary of individuals like me or wary of those types of situations, I can't press upon anything else other than respecting that boundary, either trying to find someone else like I did or continuously showing up to show them, hey, I'm not what you perceive me to be, but it's on your timeline, not mine.
Exactly.
And so I think you hit the nail on the head with the whole, we can't expect other people to act like they were raised in our home.
That's right.
That's so
it
true.
all boils really down to that because what am I doing? I'm assuming that you want to be in an apartment, you want to sleep in a house. Like you've talked about, I've had people that we move in, Miss Tommy slept in a closet for the first 6 months. She was terrified of being in an apartment because he'd been outside for so long. And in situations that we would deem scary or disgusting and stuff like that, to him that was normal. And to the point where he would prefer that than to be in an apartment. I think
it was just comfortable.
We get people housed, especially if they're coming through me, it's usually veterans. And there's opportunities for you get an apartment of your own or you get a voucher, we can go rent a house or that kind of thing. But probably 20-25% of the time, I have guys say, hey, I don't want to live by myself. And there's several group living opportunities for veterans in the city where you can, there's a 2-bedroom apartment. You have a bedroom, you have a bedroom. There's another place where they have a townhouse, there's 2 bedrooms up, 2 bedrooms down. You share a kitchen, share a living room. For people who've been chronically homeless for a long time, living in shelter, always standing in line for food, standing in line to get a shower, standing in line to get inside the hub, standing in line to check your mail. Every meal you're at a long table with 12 guys. It's really scary that you're gonna take me and give me an apartment 20 minutes from downtown. I haven't left downtown since 2008. I've been down here. Literally have not left downtown at all. And now I'm gonna go live in Raleigh or Hickory Hill. In an apartment by myself. They just don't want that. And so for some, it's that group living is gonna be more successful for them. And we have to be open to that. We don't want group living, but somebody does.
They do. Somebody does, and then on top of that, I think the hardest part of that is when an individual doesn't know how to communicate that effectively, whether it's due to mental health concerns or whatever. So then instead of telling you that or trying to work through it, they self-sabotage. And I think that's another lesson that you've done great about teaching people is like, when it gets down to it and something does go south, always be thinking about the reality of why that occurred. So instead of like for someone that began drinking inside of a home or someone that doesn't utilize the bed, they get in trouble with the manager because the place is disgusting. Well, I highly doubt that's because they wanted it to be that way. It's probably more of a sign from internal feeling of like, I'm terrified to be here. And when you start thinking in that light and you start thinking of like, there's so many mitigating factors that can cause this situation, it really, again, opens up your eyes to A, realize it's not your fault, but B, love them where they're at. And if it took that happening for them to be back on your caseload, then you have to rework it a different way, learn from that, and continue moving forward.
I had a really interesting case. A woman, she's schizophrenic with OCD.
Wow.
And she could not stand to stay in shelter. if she sat at this table, she would put napkins all over the table, all on the chair. If you give her a pen to sign something, she would wrap the pen in toilet paper and sign it. And what she told me was that she could see insects and worms and maggots in places that most people can't see them.
Yeah.
You know, and so the wall behind you, that brick wall, has a lot of porous spots. She wouldn't be able to stand to be in this room. And so we were able to get her housed in an apartment, and she would sleep in the parking lot in her car. She wouldn't go inside the apartment. And she said there's a crack in the wall, and they had put a new kitchen in, and they didn't caulk around the cabinet. And so for her, in that crack, she sees worms, she sees bugs, she sees maggots, that kind of thing. And so they were going to take the apartment from her because she wouldn't sleep inside the apartment. And even though this is not what he does for a living, Jared said, what if I buy her a tent and we put it in her living room?
In the living room, yeah.
And it worked. And she started getting mental health services, but she slept in her apartment
In a tent.
inside of this brand new tent that, that he
Hey, that's a
guided for
success.
her.
Yeah.
Huge success. And I saw her, this case was probably back in 2013, 2014. And I saw her at Kroger on Poplar and Highland, right there behind where K&G and all that stuff is. And I've never seen this woman touch another human because we're filthy, you know. And she saw me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing.
I said, what are you doing touching another person? She said, I even got a boyfriend. I said, get
Whoa.
out of here. I said, get out of here.
Let's go.
Right. Let's go. And she said, yeah, I'm on the right medicine. And she said, I don't have to sleep in a tent anymore. I can sleep in my bed. You know, she said, I don't live in an apartment anymore. I got a house. And, you know, I want to have a baby. And so
That's beautiful.
it is.
What an amazing story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the coolest.
But I mean, it takes different things for everyone. You know, there's no carbon copy of what you can apply to every person. I think it's a perfect example of that. Right. People need different things if they're experiencing homelessness or if they have a home.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm glad. I'd really never known your history as you came up to the hub. I knew a few stories here and there that I was able to get. What are you most excited about, like where we're going, what we're doing, how we're expanding, all these things?
You know, the things that I'm excited about probably will surprise you. I'm excited about seeing some of the young people who came through as interns now becoming supervisors and managers. And I'm super excited about Hallie becoming a CPRS, and now she's teaching groups and that kind of thing. And as you talk about, she came to me and asked, if I get the certification, how am I going to use it? And I asked, how do you want to use it? She said, well, I'd like to do groups. I said, well, you can do groups. I said, come in the evening and do them. I said, you'll get a little bit of overtime. I said, well, we don't care about that.
Yeah.
You know, do something in the morning, just break away and go upstairs or go to Hub Hall. And I said, and that you can be our CPRS here in addition to being case counselor, you know, until you figure out what the next move is going to be. You know, and I like that she came in with a program she designed that she just knew I was going to say no to. But I have no reason to say no because what you're doing is going to be great for you and great for our guests.
Yeah.
You know, I like that that Bailey's leading the charge in Nashville. I love that Alyssa is taking her place. I love that Antasia has gone and transformed the mailroom and GRS, and it's just not the madhouse that it was. And it's less combative and confrontation, and it smells better. It's just everything's better since she's put her spin on it. And Yolanda's idea with the family lodge, saving us thousands and thousands of dollars, yet helping way more people.
Wow.
You know, so it's all those things. I guess I should say I'm excited about Studio Village in Nashville, but I'm excited about what the individuals are accomplishing.
Yeah.
Special projects manager, you know, again, something that, you know, you're kind of creating what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like that I don't have to have all the good ideas. You know.
Hey, I think that's a sign.
Talk about Nashville. So one of the things about the Hospitality Hub is there've been eyes on us for a while, and you know, I remember years ago the mayor of it's not Blytheville,
Blytheville?
Jonesboro.
Jonesboro. Okay.
Jonesboro,
Yeah.
Arkansas. He and a couple of big pastors and his secretary had heard about us, and they came and toured the hub and asked us to help them open a hub in Jonesboro. You know, this has been at least 10 years ago. And, you know, I gave them advice and gave them intake sheets and this and that. And I met someone who was traveling, and they said that they had stopped by the hub in Jonesboro. And I think it's at a church. It's nothing like us, I'm sure, but people see us as successful innovators in this field. And, you know, I've been paid to go to Florence, Alabama and audit their systems and see what they can do better. I've been paid to go to Huntsville, Alabama and audit their camps and walk through all the encampments. You know, nearly 600 people last count living in tents and outdoors there in organized encampments, you know. And so because people see what we do and we just do what we do just in a more dynamic way, leaders of some cities have asked us to come. And I think Jared has talked to Los Angeles, and he's talked to Phoenix, and he's talked to different places. And so now we have an agreement to go to Nashville and kind of work our magic there to help clear an encampment that's got about 150 people living in it.
Wow.
And when I say clear an encampment, I don't want you to visualize German shepherds and water hoses and bulldozers and backhoes. The way we clear an encampment is with kindness and Chick-fil-A and egg and muffins and Dunkin' Donuts coffee and a kind person asking, can I approach you?
Yeah.
And the question we ask in every encampment we go, isn't there somewhere else you'd rather be?
Yep.
And I've asked that question in several cities, and I've never met a person who said, no, I'd rather stay here. I've never had a person tell me that.
Yeah.
I'd rather stay here. You know, well, I maybe not be able to move you where you want to be, but what I can do is, hey, let me give you some nights in a hotel and a counselor to talk to about what's going on. Well, I'm not ready to go today. I said, well, you know, I brought Chick-fil-A today. I'll be back in the morning with some McDonald's. You want McDonald's? Yeah, man, I want McDonald's. You know, and I'll be back in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's how we have cleared every major encampment. We don't have them here like that. And if there's one that's growing, we're going to shrink it or get rid of it in the city of Memphis. And now Nashville's hired us to do that there. And it's going to be a huge success because I think we have the right approach.
Absolutely.
If you could leave the people watching this with one footnote, one lesson, one prophecy.
One more, I guess you could say. You have a ton that you've given,
Yeah,
but one
what
final
would
one.
You matter. You are a member of a family or a group or a sorority or a fraternity or an organization that you can mobilize and raise $5 per person, per month, and give it to an agency that's doing work that you believe in. You have energy, you have effort, you have resources, you have ideas, and all of that stuff is valuable to places like the Hub who are trying to help people exit homelessness. So I would say, put your skin in the game. There's so many people who love you and respect you and will listen to you when you talk. And so talk to them and let them know that all of us are responsible for getting people off the street.
Beautiful.
Perfect. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, man.
That was incredible.
See you at work Monday.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know. So many things.
nice.
So many things I didn't